Want all the
Okay.
land board members in here.
Okay, we'll do whatever you
Not
want us to
excited
do,
about
we will
that,
do.
so it's-
Okay. All right, good morning, everyone. I am going to be giving the first award, and I'm really tickled about this particular award. I'm tickled about all the awards, but this one is pretty near and dear to my heart because of its location in Southeast Portland. And even before I'll say that the trail was built, I spent a lot of time in this area. So I'm just really, really pleased. So welcome everyone to the State Land Board Awards Ceremony. We do this annually in celebration of the work that Oregonians do to help our wetlands, waters, and lands thrive and to preserve the beauty and bounty of Oregon. These awards honor exceptional projects and people for their contributions to protecting and enhancing natural resources. Since the awards were established in 2004, the Land Board has presented more than 35 awards recognizing extraordinary efforts in every single region of Oregon. This year, we again found excellence across the state. Though diverse in their contributions, these 5 projects and partners are connected by a common thread, tackling complex problems collaboratively to benefit Oregon communities. So it's my honor to present our first award, the Oaks Bottom Wildlife Refuge Wetland Restoration created a natural connection between the Willamette River and the refuge for the first time in more than 100 years. Portland's first urban wildlife refuge, Oaks Bottom provides incredibly important habitat for hundreds of species in the heart of Portland. But an inadequate culvert, those culverts, blocked fish passage and impeded water flow between the refuge and the river. This particular project allowed young salmon to access Oaks Bottom by installing a large fish-friendly culvert and improving wetland habitats. Young salmon now have cool, calm waters for resting and refueling on their journey to the ocean. Creating this haven meant overcoming unique construction and logistical challenges with creativity and collaboration. For example, on the Springwater Trail, on the Willamette Trail, a major, I will say this, major bicycle commuting and recreation route needed to be closed for 6 months during the construction. And in talking to the team, I just realized how frustrated, that's probably the nice word, cyclers were during that closure because there's not easy access for a detour. But the City of Portland staff worked with bike advocacy groups to gain support for the project, develop detour routes, and raise awareness of the closure. This 75-acre wetland restoration took major coordination and cooperation. The Portland Bureau of Environmental Services, Portland Parks and Recreation, and the Army Corps of Engineers led the effort. State regulatory partners included the Department of State Lands, Department of Fish and Wildlife, and community partners included the Selwood Moreland Improvement League, the Oaks Amusement Park, the Oregon Yacht Club, the Urban Green Spaces Institute, and Portland Audubon. With great partnership comes great benefit. As we mentioned earlier, young salmon species can now find refuge at Oaks Bottom. Beaver, amphibians, and birds have enhanced habitat. And it is truly a wild place loved by Portlanders and me. Accepting this wetland award for the Oaks Bottom Wildlife Refuge Restoration are Don Uchiyama and Sean Beestoff of the Bureau of Environmental Services. The project team includes Rhonda Fast, Darian Samter, Dave Heltzer, and Mark Peters from BES, Laura Goodurun, and Sandra, I don't know, I'm not going to get this last name, I'll give it my best shot, Fatizada Versos from Portland Parks and Recreation, and longtime Oaks Bottom advocate, Mike Hauk of the Urban Green Spaces Institute, and Bob Salinger, who we know well at the Land Board of Portland Audubon. So team, come on forward and please give them a round of applause for their really amazing work. Can we get anybody's name? Thank you. Really cool. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Great work. Thank you. Which one? This one? Okay. Stunning. Who gets to take it? Okay, all right. Let's put you in the middle then. And I think you can stand in front of the treasurer. And we can see you. Yeah. Say. Yeah. Anyway, wonderful. Congratulations. You're awesome. Yeah. Let's see. Governor. Thanks.
Congratulations to the Oaks Bottom Project team. It is now my pleasure to present our second wetland award to the Klamath Lake Wetland Mitigation Project. This project, developed to mitigate the wetland impacts of improving Highway 140, transformed a degraded 45-acre landscape on the shores of Klamath Lake into wetlands, channels, and a pond for reintroduction of endangered fish species that are a cultural pillar for the Klamath tribes. Klamath Lake in south central Oregon is the largest freshwater lake west of the Rocky Mountains. And the governor mentioned how important it is for her, and special it was to her to present this one. This one is a special one for me to present because when we were in Klamath County in August, my daughter lost her first tooth ever in Klamath County. So I feel a special kinship to Klamath County as well. The health of the Klamath Basin is intricately linked to the health of Klamath Lake. Since the early 1900s, agricultural uses have replaced more than 70% of the wetlands connected to the lake, greatly affecting the health of the entire basin. Environmental stressors and habitat loss have put the Lost Lake sucker and the short-nosed sucker, known by the Klamath tribes as Schwam and Koptu, on the brink of extinction. Prior to European colonization, the Klamath tribes were fishers and hunter-gatherers who benefited from the abundance of natural resources, particularly those associated with wetlands and waters. They survived the long winters on the rich protein of the Schwam and the Koptu. The tribe's creation story says, quote, "If Schwam go away, the people go away." These once abundant fish were listed as endangered in 1988. All surviving suckers in Klamath Lake were born in the early 1990s. Today, the Schwam and Koptu are within 10 years of extinction. This amazing project could help change that. Half-acre, meticulously designed sucker rearing pond serves as an experimental nursery for juvenile suckers and advances science for the potential recovery. Project's wetlands and channels replace historically lost sucker habitat, also improving water quality and providing critical restoration in the Klamath Basin. State and federal agencies, tribal representatives, contractors, and volunteers worked throughout this ambitious undertaking. Exceptional collaboration brought exceptional results. Klamath Lake Wetland Mitigation Project addressed past and future impacts to meaningfully improve water quality and wetland habitat for the endangered fish species that are so important to the Klamath tribes. It's my honor to present the Wetland Award to the Klamath Lake Wetland Mitigation Project Team, the Oregon Department of Transportation, the Federal Highway Administration, Western Federal Lands Highway Division, and the Klamath Tribes Research Station, the U.S. Forest Service Restoration Services team. Accepting this award on behalf of the Tribal Council is Secretary Roberta Frost of the Klamath Tribe. Congratulations and come on up for the award. Picture.
Don't worry.
Don't make me stand here. Thank you.
Congratulations again to the Klamath Lake team. It's my pleasure now to present this year's Stream Award to the Three Rivers Cedar Creek Hatchery Fish Passage Restoration Project. Quite a name and quite a project. Thanks to this innovative project, young salmon and other fish species can speed along 14 more miles of salmon superhighway on their journey to the Pacific Ocean. The Salmon Superhighway, and I do really like that name, is a unique community partnership seeking to restore access to nearly 180 miles of blocked habitat throughout 6 North Coast rivers. Each year, the Salmon Superhighway reconnects more historic habitat, reduces chronic flooding, improves roads and infrastructure, increases recreation opportunities, and stimulates the local economy. Removing these barriers to fish passage through the Three Rivers tributary at Cedar Creek Hatchery was a high priority because the Three Rivers supports the threatened Oregon coastal coho salmon, as well as spring and fall chinook, winter steelhead, coastal cutthroat trout, and other species. It's a really interesting project, a weir barrier that crossed the full width of the Three Rivers with concrete abutments on both banks. You can see some of this, I think. The barrier facilitated collection of hatchery stock, but it was at maximum height of 9 feet for most of the year. And of course, that's a barrier. It impedes fish passage for most of that year. So the creative folks at ODF&W, the engineers, found a solution by replacing the existing weir with an inflatable weir and a functional fish ladder and passage facilities, which results in this passage, the stretch, being open for travel. It was specifically designed to provide continuous year-round passage for species of concern like the Pacific lamprey, juvenile salmonids, and smaller cutthroat, as well as detaining adult salmon to allow manual sorting of hatchery fish, doing 2 things at once. The Salmon Superhighway Partnership is aiming to complete 93 access restoration projects in just 10 years. Really impressive number. And they've got 115 miles reconnected already. So these partners are getting these salmon well on their way. The project was led by the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, the partners from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, U.S. Forest Service, Trout Unlimited, and Nestucca, Nesquin, and Sand Lake Watersheds Council. So I am really pleased that there are a lot of people from this project with us today, including Joel Watts from ODF&W, Sarah Zwisler from the Salmon Superhighway Partnership, along with Amy Hirschman from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Liz Ransom from Trout Unlimited, Albert Knopf from the Nestucca, Nesquin, and Sand Lake Watersheds Council, and Adriana Morales and Robert Sanchez from the U.S. Forest Service. So would you all please join me and
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead and the Salmon Superhighway. Superhighway. Congratulations.
Let's see, where are we? All right. Well, I think we're all going to be whispering Salmon Superhighway to our kids and our grandkids. Very cool. Congratulations again. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Right. I am Truly honored to present today's final award, our Catalyst Award. Lieutenant Doug Asbo leads the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office Homeless Outreach and Programs Engagement Team, the HOPE Team. Of course, you knew there was going to be a great acronym. The HOPE Team respectfully engages people experiencing homelessness, building networks with service providers and connecting people with needed services. The partnership of the HOPE Team has been incredibly important to the state's ongoing efforts to reduce the impacts of long-term camping along Oregon waterways. Compassionate, collaborative, and unfailingly dedicated, Lieutenant Asbo has been pivotal to this work. He would be the first to remind you that he is certainly part of a team. And the entire HOPE team is doing incredible support, incredible work with the support and of course, encouragement of Multnomah County Commissioners. Let's give them a round of applause. And Sheriff Mike Reese, yay. And Sheriff-elect Morrissey O'Donnell. But I have a reminder of my own. This award, the Catalyst Award, recognizes people who bring change, the people whose spark lights our way, whose words and actions lead us toward a better Oregon and a better world. Lieutenant Asbo has been a catalyst in so many ways, demonstrating the importance and effectiveness of compassion. He's committed to understanding individual experiences and needs. He builds real relationships. He lifts up his team and his partners, sharing knowledge and securing resources. The State Lands team is proud to follow your example, Lieutenant, and I am incredibly grateful for your leadership. Please join me in congratulating Lieutenant Doug Asbo, our Catalyst Award recipient. Put you in the middle here. Go ahead and take your award. This way, okay. Are you okay if the rest of the folks from Multnomah County Sheriff's Office come up?
Absolutely.
Okay, come on up. He's following in her father's very large footsteps. This way, okay. I'll let you hang on to it. Okay. Congratulations.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sure, you around. Thanks. All right, just want to say congratulations to all of our Land Board Award recipients and thank you to everyone who joined us this morning. I know some of you drove many distances, not the folks from Portland. You don't you do count, but it's not very far. So there may have been a little traffic. I just want to close with one more round of applause to everyone. Thank you. Well done. Okay, all right. Okay, perfect, perfect. Yeah. Walker, are you ready? Is team DSL ready? Okay, I see a thumbs up from the back of the room. That must be Ted. Thank you, Ted. Good morning. Let's bring the October 11th, 2022 State Land Board meeting to fruition. The first item is consent agenda, and I would ask for approval of the minutes of the August 9th, 2022 State Land Board meeting.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
A motion and a second, hearing and seeing no objection, so ordered. All right, Director Walker, action item number 2.
Thank you, Governor. Good morning, Secretary and Treasurer. Nice to see you all. And it was a great celebration this morning before we started. I love those land board awards. They're just real dedication by Oregonians. Our first action item is the permanent rules restricting public use of Hayden Island in Portland. The issue is whether the state land board should approve the restrictions on the public use of approximately 500 yards of the bank of the Columbia River along the north side of Hayden Island. The authorities are set out below. As you know from my previous report at a prior meeting, since 2018, the department has received numerous reports of activities associated with unauthorized camps, seriously impacting the safety and health of the riverbank and river. And we heard about the sheriff's office this morning with Lieutenant Asbo's assistance with the HOPE team. That is important to us at the department, as well as it's important for us to do our part. In response to all of the complaints and reports, the department on May 9th of this year enacted temporary emergency restrictions. The map of the site is located as Appendix D in your notebook. And then during the June 11, 2022 State Land Board meeting, you all approved the department initiating that rulemaking. So that's what we're here to do today, is talk about that rulemaking. Rulemaking Advisory Committee, otherwise known in the vernacular as a RAC, was convened remotely on July 7 to review and make comments on the proposed rule language. Those RAC members are Michael Layloff, Roadway Inn and Suite, Ron Schmidt, President of Waterfront Organizations of Oregon, Chris Hathaway from the Lower Columbia Estuary Partnership, Kathy Evanson, a resident of Hayden Island and a board member of WOO, Michael Phelps at Cascadia Behavioral Health Care, Chad Diekman, Deputy, Multnomah County Sheriff's Department River Patrol, yet another one of their great folks, Lucas Hillier, staff at the City of Portland. The RAC reviewed and approved the impact statements and rule language and sent that off to the Secretary of State's office. Thank you, Madam Secretary. On July 27th, that is Appendix B. And that instigated the public review and comment period that began August 1 through August 31. A public hearing was held via Zoom August 15, which was well publicized. In total, the department received 7 comments. All of the comments supported the proposed rule. Comments are located in Appendix C, and the final rules are in Appendix A. Therefore, the department recommends the land board adopt the proposed rule, OAR, Oregon Administrative Rule, 141-088-0240, to prohibit public use of state-owned property between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m., the establishment of a campsite at any time, and fires at any time on approximately 500 yards of the bank of the Columbia River along the north side of Hayden Island between the Interstate 5 bridge and a wing dam to the west. If adopted, the proposed rule will go into effect on November 1, 2022.
Is there any public testimony?
No, ma'am.
There's no public testimony. All right, is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I move approval of the staff recommendation as presented by Director Walker.
Treasurer Reed moves approval of the staff recommendation presented by Director Walker. Is there a second?
Governor, I second the motion. I'll just note that it feels apropos to do this on the day that we honored Lieutenant Asbo, knowing that with this prohibition, that there is the Hope team out making sure that folks do have a place to go.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I might also comment, as I've made mention of before, I'm supportive of the motion, obviously, but continue to be frustrated that we do this at 500 yards at a time, and continue to be interested in what other approaches are available, including the sheriff's office, to be a little bit more comprehensive than even on the efficiency question of we may be doing this again, another 500 yards. That's disappointing.
So noted. Thank you, Treasurer Reed. And while the sheriff's office is leaving us, I just again want to say thank you for their incredible efforts, and particularly Sheriff Asbo for his work, and Sheriff Reese, who is retiring after many, many years of service as well. So thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing no objection to the motion is so ordered. Dr. Walker, back to you for informational agenda.
Thank you. We'll move on to the Common School Fund Annual Report. I'll be joined at the table by John Hershey, who is Director of Investments at the Oregon State Treasury. And he will give you a mixed report about good things and bad things that happen in the market. So John, it's all for you.
Super, thank you. Governor Brown, Secretary Fagan, and Treasurer Reed. First off, it's my pleasure to be here in person. Last year it was virtual. And I want to introduce one of our consultants who's on the line as well. That's Fernie Jelajel, who's with Aon, and she is calling in from Chicago. And we are both available, obviously, for questions either during the presentation or at the end. So as noted, I'm the Director of Investments. I work for the Treasurer. I've been with the investment division for nearly 15 years now, and it's about a year and a half that I've been working on this portfolio after Mike Viteri left the state. Let me see if I'm competent here. Let's move on to the objectives. We'll go very quickly. I think everybody knows this. The objective here is create returns to support the Department of Education. Let me first talk about the asset allocation of the portfolio. So this is, in many ways, this is kind of the critical driver of returns over time. The last time we did an asset allocation study was back in 2018. And if you go to the third column to the right in red, what you see there are the target weights. And so we go across a number of different asset classes. We come up with those target weights, and then we review those every several years. The other number I want to draw your eye to is that expected return over 10 years. If you look at the bottom right and the second row from the bottom, that's the 6.6 expected return based on those target weights and based on current assumptions about expected returns across the asset classes, as well as it regards to inflation. The critical thing to note here is that when you look at the changes in expected returns and mostly the changes in inflation, the required return for the portfolio in order to achieve generational equity, given the 3.5% distribution policy, is now closer to 7.1%. And so the current or the just passed asset allocation was insufficient to achieve the objective. So that brings me to the next slide, which is the new asset allocation. This was presented to the Oregon Investment Council earlier this year. Aon was the consultant who put together that presentation. And what you'll see, if you again go to the bottom right, we now have an expected return over the next 10 years of 7.1%. That's to achieve the generational equity that is part of the mission of the Common School Fund. To do that did require changing some of the weights. They were not drastic changes. And in fact, there were essentially two main changes, and that was that private equity weight was moved from 10 to 15%. Private equity has been historically the best performing asset class. And so we added some additional weight to that. And we reduced some of the weight to fixed income. We went from 25% down to 20%. There were some modest changes in the real estate portfolio as well, but those were the two main drivers in order to bring the expected return up to 7.1%. And the other benefit is that this asset allocation looks much more like a traditional endowment. Traditional endowments don't tend to have so much fixed income, and they are a payout model. They're different from a defined benefit program. And so what we have here is now kind of what we were hoping to have. I can pause here and take any questions about this. I guess the one other thing to note, this was not a study of the asset allocation and the distribution policy that you would have had done back in 2018. This kept the 3.5% as the assumed distribution and then worked around the asset allocation as a result of that. And again, we can.
Questions?
All right, terrific. Thank you. Okay, so performance. I think I'm probably early in the agenda this year because we have bad news to report. We'll get that out over last year. I think it was toward the end of the agenda. We had good news to report. The other thing I'm going to mention is this, what I'm about to say is going to be very self-serving, but true. And so what do I mean by that? I went back and listened to the YouTube recording of last year's presentation. We were all pretty pleased. I think the Common School Fund's performance was over 20% for that annual performance. The stock market was over 40%. It was extraordinary times. So here's the self-serving part. I think I did tell the board that those returns were not sustainable. And in fact, that the tailwinds of that year were going to be the future headwinds. And indeed, at the 1 hour and 20-minute mark, I said I could very well be coming back next year with different performance. That was an understatement. It has been a particularly rugged year for performance. We can see that the fund itself went down 4.6%. Which is a pretty significant decrease. It was really, kind of a tale of two cities. The first half of the fiscal year, third quarter and fourth quarter of last year, were up, and in particular, the fourth quarter looked pretty strong. What we didn't anticipate, of course, was a war in Europe. We didn't anticipate all sorts of unexpected inflation driven, by it could be gas prices, could be the war, could be supply chain problems, could be fiscal stimulus. There are a whole host of drivers of the unexpected inflation, and that has in fact driven rate hikes that we've all seen. I'll move now. Oh, I guess there is one glimmer. I should note of positive news on this slide, and that is the excess return. Excess return is how did we do relative to our benchmark? And 2.5% is a pretty sizable excess return. That's a pretty unusual amount. It's largely driven by the fact that we have a significant number of what we call alternative investment asset classes. So the traditional asset classes are public equities and fixed income, but then you also have things like private equity, private real estate, other alternatives. And those asset classes generated positive absolute returns during the year when the traditional asset classes had pretty significant negative returns. And so that's what relative to peers, relative to the benchmark, is what gave us some glimmer of some positive news to share.
John, just want to confirm that the total fund, the market value of the total fund at this point is 2.1 billion.
It's 2.1 billion as of June 30th.
Okay.
The third quarter, we don't have precise numbers yet. That just
but we know it's been a little grim.
It's been worse.
Okay.
So today, the last I looked, it was about 2 billion.
Okay.
As Q3 has continued the negative market performance.
And I don't remember where it was at 2021. And since you watched
was
the YouTube video, you might
4 and 2.5.
Okay.
Which I think might have been high water marks. I have a slide at the very end of the presentation that looks at the long-term performance,
Okay.
and we'll be able to kind of get pretty close to that.
But generally speaking, at least my recollection from my time on the land board is that we are up and over the last decade.
Yes, yes. And in fact, the slide that we'll get to it is an up and to the right slide, but
It is.
you also have, you have these bumps. We've had them in, I'm old enough to have had it in 1987, 98, 2008. These are other bumps in the, and when you go through them, they're painful. But when you look at them with the benefit of 40, 50 years, you see that they are just that. They tend to be bumps.
So folks, we shouldn't panic.
We should not panic.
Okay.
We should not panic. We can't predict what the short-term performance will be. But I can speak pretty confidently that the long-term performance should match long-term history. All right. So the largest asset class, as you can see here, which is nearly $1 billion, is the public equity performance. Again, the 1 year is in absolute terms, and absolute terms are really the only returns that matter. You can see is quite negative. And as I mentioned, that's going to also be down in Q3. But it's a very similar story to what we just talked about for the total fund. That's not a surprise. It's nearly 50% of the fund, so it drives that. So again, what you had was negative absolute performance and positive excess return. One of the features of excess return for the public equity portfolio has been, 5 years of a strategy that has been put tilts into value. The first 3 years were very difficult, and the last 2 years have been very good for relative performance. Again, relative performance doesn't pay the bills. Absolute performance does. But I will say I'd credit our public equity team within Treasury for having done a nice job over the last couple of years. And indeed, you can see over the last 10 years, they're still above their benchmark and have delivered kind of excess performance.
Madam Chair, but just before you go on, I was just thinking about the advantages I've had hearing this before and whether it might be worth explaining a little more about MSCI and what that makes up. You've made the point, I think, implicitly about relative versus absolute returns, but that how we pick a benchmark and what that really means might also.
Sure. So I think most people have heard of the S&P 500, which would be the 500 stocks in the United States. MSCI is a global index, so it's going to include international stocks. It's going to include some of the emerging market stocks. So it's just a broader measure. They tend to move very much in tandem. Sometimes international stocks outperform domestic stocks, and sometimes it's the reverse. The Oregon Investment Council has thought that we're a global investor, and so the benchmark ought to be a global benchmark. And indeed, if you look at our public equities team, they're going to have investments with international external managers as well as domestic focused external managers. And Reneen, if there's anything else you'd like to add to that, I'm happy to take that. Or if you think that's a sufficient answer, you can say so as well.
That's a sufficient answer. Thank you.
Good. I pass. So let's move to fixed income. In many respects, this is the most interesting slide of the deck. Fixed income is typically thought of as conservative, stable. It's what you want your grandparents to be in. And so what's happened instead is it's been a really difficult performing asset class when you don't normally expect that. And so, why is that? Well, again, to what I said earlier, no one was expecting the kind of volatility to take place, and in particular with inflation. Inflation really hits hard bonds. And so what we've had is a Fed that has taken upon itself to go back and dust off the playbook of Paul Volcker from 40 years ago and raise rates to combat this unexpected inflation. And the markets are taking a look at the Fed's resolve, if you will, and it is pricing in how many 3/4 point increases should we expect this year. And what has tended to happen is that that expectation has grown. There was a lot of discussion earlier in the year whether inflation was transitory. due to maybe supply chain issues, or more permanent. And what seems to have happened, and it's awfully tough to discern, you can't break these things apart, is that it's become a more permanent problem, and hence the Fed is taking a more aggressive approach to raising rates. Raising rates has the future impact of a more, kind of a more difficult economy. And so the equity markets are very concerned about a potential recession. And so what you're getting is a bond market that's getting hurt at the same time an equity market is getting hurt. That's not typical. What's more typical in a more stable inflationary environment is that the fixed income portfolio is a ballast to windward to the stock market. It's the flight to quality when there's a crisis in the stock market or in the economy. So this is that one environment. Some call it stagflation, where you might have a fairly slow growing economy. At the same time, you have fast growing inflation. It's the worst quadrant really to have. And hence fixed income is not doing very well at the same time that public equities are not doing well. So that's the one in many ways where we're watching the most closely. You'll note the excess return is negative. Our external managers, we have two managers who manage the fixed income portfolio for the Common School Fund. They were in that transitory camp a few quarters ago. So they've been caught offsides by the stubbornness of inflation, and so they are adjusting to that, and so that's really the driver of this kind of performance. Any questions on the fixed income market? Because it is
No question, but they weren't the only ones caught off guard.
they were,
That was not, that was a fairly universally held opinion.
it really was. It really was. Okay, so let me turn to maybe some better news. I would say better news only in a transitory sense. And we talked a little bit last year about private equity. Private equity is the best absolute returning asset class. You can see those 10-year returns of 16.3%. That's higher than the public equity returns of a couple of slides ago. The other thing you'll note is that excess return is kind of eye-poppingly large. Last year, it was eye-poppingly small. It was a negative 23%. And I do recall telling the board that, public equity and private equity, they lag each other. What happens is public equities, you can see what the mark is that evening when the markets close. In the private market, they only mark quarterly, and they mark kind of 3 months in arrears of public equities. There's a whole host of reasons I don't necessarily want to go through as to the reason for that, but that is the reason why you get these lags. And what I said last year when we talked about the minus 23%, I said, don't worry about it. It really doesn't matter that much. And while I might have the urge to crow about the positive 12.7%, I'm not going to, because that would be disingenuous, obviously. Right? So again, we don't pay much attention to those kind of 1 year excess return when you are dealing with the private markets. What we do care about is those absolute returns that are strong. I will say I would expect in future quarters these private equity returns will start to go negative because they are driven by the comparables of the public market returns. The public market returns are down. You can anticipate in a couple of quarters the private equity returns will be down as well. Real estate in some respects has been our best performing asset class. We had put in place what we call a core portfolio. Core means the lowest risk portion of the real estate market. So we are looking at, as an example, you would look at, I think I used this last year, office buildings in a large gateway city that are fully leased up in our Class A properties. That's an example. Same true of a multifamily building. So we have kind of the core strategy. Again, however, I would expect, and the excess returns have been strong. This is a young portfolio for the Common School Fund, so it's only about 4 years old. Again, however, Real estate lags because leases tend to be fairly long. So think of a 7-year office lease. It's going to take a while for that lease to roll off and then get recontracted at a lower rent. And that will then make that building less valuable. So over time, we'll expect to see some of the segments of real estate get hit. The two that are getting hit the most are office with remote working. Companies are learning they don't need as much space as they once thought they did. And then retail is also with e-commerce kind of marching on. It turns out the retail malls and things are not quite as valuable as they once were. The areas that are doing strong are multifamily, and in particular logistics or warehouses. Because of e-commerce, warehouses are much more so in demand. So it depends within the real estate program, but overall, it's done well.
Go on, Madam Chair. Just a quick point here, because we've talked about this. It's to some extent the land board. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more, John, about just the strategy here. In that second bullet, there's lots of names of funds. We are not investing in individual properties here. We're investing in managers and strategies, and particularly your point about moving towards the core segment. It bears repeating.
Sure. So both in the pension plan and the common school fund, we are known as what would be called an allocator. So we go and we allocate along that asset allocation, and then we pick external managers to do the investing on our behalf. So what staff's job is really, with some exceptions in the public equity and the fixed income world, where they do some of their own internal management, but particularly in all these alternatives, we meet hundreds and hundreds of investment managers, and we are there to discern which do we think are the best. If you were to, there are thousands of external firms built around, raising capital from pension plans and endowments and foundations, and then investing it on their behalf. So you're exactly right, Treasurer Reed. We don't go out and look for investment property to invest on our own. We rely on, like that list would say, a Harrison Street, which is, Harrison Street's interesting. They might do some student housing. They might do some life sciences and biotech office centers. And then you've got others. Abacus Multifamily, for example, is doing what we would call Class B garden style apartments, as opposed to Class A, inside the city high-rise apartments. So we have different strategies, and our job is to allocate to those different managers.
Of course, at the risk of beating this horse a little further, I am of the opinion that that's the strategy we should be employing here too, not speculating on individual properties. That strategy has served the pension, and I'd say the common school fund, really well by engaging that external expertise and diversification.
Well, and given, we wouldn't have the staff resources to do it. Let's stop. The alternatives performance. So this is an interesting one. The Oregon Investment Council, and I mentioned this in the strategic priorities last year, the goal for many years has been to take the alternatives portfolio and split it into two. And so we did do that. It had an unlikely marriage of infrastructure funds and what I call diversifying strategy funds. Diversifying strategy funds are liquid. They invest every day in the stock and bond markets, whereas the infrastructure funds are much more like private equity. They'll go out and invest over a 7 or 10 year period. Diversifying strategies is interesting because for years we've wondered whether it will achieve its mission. Its mission has been to be uncorrelated with the stock and bond markets. And that's important because then it provides, a level, as the name suggests, of diversification. We've had, a long period of time of growing stock and bond markets, and it's only now that we're actually able to see whether that portfolio is doing what we hoped it would do. And the good news is it has. We can see the overall portfolio up significantly. I did take a look at the September numbers, and the diversifying strategies piece of this portfolio is up, I think, 17% year to date and 19% over the past 12 months ending September. So that's, normally fixed income would provide that cover. This time it's the diversifying strategies sleeve that is doing so. It's not a huge sleeve, so there's, it has a limit to what it can do to the overall fund or portfolio, but it is doing what we had hoped it would do. And what you'll see next year is, instead of an alternatives portfolio, you'll see a separate portfolio called real assets with things like the infrastructure. And then you'll see the diversifying strategies portfolio split out. And so you'll be able to see the performance of each. Okay. Speaking of strategic priorities, so we had a number last year that we had hoped to accomplish in 2022. I think the good news is we have largely accomplished those. I've touched on these before. The first was doing an asset allocation study, which we hadn't done in about 4 years. We presented that to the OIC in July. That's what resulted in those modest shifts in private equity and fixed income. And it also approved that split of the alternatives portfolio into 2 pieces. And so that's worked well. The policy updates is something we've been working on for a while. And we presented those also to the Oregon Investment Council at their last council meeting in September. That created a more robust investment policy statement. The Clean School Fund's policy statement had been, we'll call it, rather thin, maybe 3 pages. Now it's more robust. It covers more ground. It's in fact going to be the template and proxy for the pension plan's investment policy statement. So that was, it's a pretty rigorous effort to get that right. And then after that, we're really now at the kind of the blocking and tackling stage. And that is going around to the various investment officers who run those individual asset classes and making sure that the Common School Fund has had the proper time and attention. I'll give you a good example. So the diversifying strategy sleeve had 2 investment managers. Now we're on pace to bring that up to 9 in what's called Project Pathfinder, which was to go and find other investment managers and strategies to augment that portfolio. One thing that we do have is any strategy that's been approved for the pension plan is automatically approved by the OIC for the Common School Fund. So we're able to kind of to draft a little bit off of the hard work that those investment teams do surrounding those asset classes. So that's what I mean by review, portfolio construction, and investment manager composition. So I think I'll end there, and Renine and I are happy to take questions.
I'll just say it looks like a clear uptick in the value of the fund since looks like January of 2009. And I'm sure my being here is only a mere coincidence of that. But the pressure is on you two to keep it going up. So it's on him. Okay.
I would say the team that John is part of deserves a ton of credit, because it is a really challenging environment for all the reasons and more that John pointed out. I do have one question before that other comment, and I just feel we're lucky that Renine has joined us from Chicago. She's really talented and dedicated as well, so I don't think we should let her escape without at least some questions. So Renine, I wonder if there are any lessons we should take. You don't spend all your time on Oregon's investments. So anything that you've seen with your other clients that we should be paying attention to, particularly with the governor and Secretary of State here?
I mean, I think, as John articulated, the market is certainly challenging. And one way, for you to see that fixed income performance was negative as well, given the yield environment, one way that helps navigate these different market environments in different periods is diversification. That's one area that's really done well this year, and you're moving in that direction with the approved asset allocation as well, which should help in that fashion as well. So thinking about infrastructure exposure within real estate, broadening that opportunity set, all of these factors that you've approved or the OIC has approved is certainly going to help navigate this market environment even more. And I think you're doing all the right things here. And then on the front of policy and approving a new investment policy statement, this governance is the key to success of an investment program. And I think the OIC focusing on that this year is a great value add, specifically for the Common School Fund as well. And then the last thing I would mention, John said the asset allocation study was conducted this year. The spending study was not, and we think it would be appropriate to potentially reevaluate that once the SB 1566 distribution in 2027 that should end in 2027. And so at that point, it should make sense to reevaluate the spending study, depending on whether that actually ends or it gets renewed or whatnot. And so we think that would be the trigger of an assumption change, right? So those were the additional comments I wanted to add.
Thank you. That last one really will be on the Secretary of State. I won't be here.
You're right. You will not be here then. So, all right. Any other questions?
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you for your really hard work. Thank you for your really extraordinary performance. Reneen, thank you so much for joining us. And John, keep up the great work, you and your team. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, Governor, should I move on to agenda item 4?
Please, that would be terrific.
Okay, agenda item 4 is a trust property transition update memo that I requested from Treasury. I thought you all might be interested in knowing how the transition was successful from the 2019 session when we passed, the legislature passed Senate Bill 454. Which moved the trust property division from Department of State Lands to Oregon State Treasury, and that became effective July 1, 2021. And I'll tell you that Claudia Chabanu, who wrote this report, did an excellent job, and we miss Claudia on our staff. But I know she's in a good place because if you've read through the memo, they've done extraordinarily well since the program has moved. All 17 full-time equivalent employees at that time moved with the program. A budget of 81 million moved. The unclaimed property website and underlying system phone numbers and support functions were all successfully transitioned at that time. And what I highlighted in yellow in my notes is the customer experience was seamless and the downtime was less than 6 hours. That comes from extremely wonderful coordination between the Department of State Lands and Treasury to make sure that was seamless. And they did a fantastic job. I'm just really pleased. I'm going to go ahead and point out a couple of other things, and then Treasury would probably like to say a few words. I will tell you that when they took over the program, they had 16,000 outstanding claims, and the approval timeframe hovered around 13 months. That's way outside of Oregon law, and we knew that, which is why we kept asking for staff, and we kept getting denied. And when the program got transferred, the treasurer was able to get an extra staff person to help with claims processing, and that brought those claims timelines down almost in half. So that's an incredible achievement, which also sends more money back out to Oregonians. The Treasury held their first holder reporting season this past year. And that's always a wild west show, really. It's a lot of work and a lot of money coming in. And you brought in 93.1 million in unclaimed property and 948 abandoned safety deposit boxes. That's incredible. And the program received yet another FTE to help in the by hiring a compliance and holder reporting manager and auditor. That's really extremely helpful. And if you're not aware of what the holder reporting is, all of the folks in Oregon who do business here, if they have any money that they have taken, like your landlord, you've given deposits, you got a refund on your insurance, whatever, all of that has to be reported and sent to the Department of State Lands. They don't always do that. So the department would go after them and make sure that they did. So there was holder compliance, and the treasurer smiled about that one. So we can talk about that. I will also tell you the estates division got an FTE, which was critical because more folks are still dying without a will or an estate plan. So Treasury was able to transfer 64.2 million of unclaimed property funds to the Common School Fund on July 1, 2022, and 351,000, a little over 351 in escheated estates. Excellent transition. I think it puts to rest any concerns that folks had about this, because I know it. I was in the legislature, and so were you, Governor, and so was the treasurer when all this was attempted 3 times. So I'm really proud of my staff for working the legislature very hard this time around to help them understand the importance of moving that program and what it would bring. So that would be all I would have to say. Mr. Treasurer, would you like to add to that?
All I would add, I think you did a very nice job, Madam Director, is just to echo your comments and gratitude to the team at DSL and to Treasury for making a smooth transition, and a credit to the team that has made really remarkable progress. And we celebrate that and rededicate ourselves to continuing that trajectory of bringing down that response time and those number of outstanding claims. The trajectory is really encouraging, and we're not anywhere near satisfied. So thanks for bringing us to this point, and feel really good about where we're headed.
Thank you. And I miss Ms. Jabanu's children. She has 2 children, a boy and a girl, and I would put extra special things in my candy bowl besides candy. And they would have their names on it. And when they came to visit, they got extra special things. And then they would draw me pictures and write thank you notes, which I think I still have hanging in my office. So I do miss that. But we have lots of other staff here that have young families, and it's always nice to see them. We'll move on to the Aquatic Resource Management Program Annual Report. Governor, if you'd like me to do that, I'll call up Deputy Bill Ryan to the table, and he will give this very exciting report this time around.
Thank you, Director Walker, and Deputy Director Ryan, welcome.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Governor Brown, Secretary Fagan, Treasurer Reed. For the record, my name is Bill Ryan. I'm Deputy Director of Operations here at the Oregon Department of State Lands, and I'm pleased to be presenting highlights from the Aquatic Resource Management Program's annual report for fiscal year 2022. The full report is in your meeting packet, and I'm going to hit some highlights. And I think the timing is really nice with us having the Land Board Awards earlier this morning to really highlight one of the important things that the department does outside of the fiduciary duty of generating revenue for the Common School Fund. The department oversees Oregon's removal, fill, and wetland conservation laws and the use of Oregon's publicly owned waterways. I think it's important to emphasize the importance of the work we do protecting the state's waters and wetlands. In light of increasing pressures from population growth and climate change, Oregon's wetlands and waters are critical to ensuring the well-being of Oregonians today and for future generations. Oregon's wetlands and waterways provide critical services, including provision of fresh, cool water, groundwater recharge and flood prevention. They provide habitat for fish and wildlife. They provide fire breaks and refuge for fish and wildlife and humans even when wildfires do occur. And of course, we're seeing more and more wildfires and anticipate more of those in the future. They also provide natural spaces for Oregonians to recreate, engage in commerce, and to learn. The Aquatic Resource Management Program works with property owners and local governments to determine when proposed projects may impact wetlands and waters of the state, and then issues removal fill permits for those activities. The program also works with ports, utility companies, businesses, and property owners to authorize use of state-owned navigable waterways, which include major rivers, lakes, and the territorial sea. The Aquatic Resource Management team delivers service statewide, supporting communities and landowners in protecting waters and wetlands. Day-to-day oversight of these aquatic resources involves engaging in outreach and education that supports landowners, developers, businesses, governments, and consultants in minimizing impacts to aquatic resources, reviewing applications for removal or fill of material in wetlands and waters, and for the use of state-owned waterways, analyzing the proposed activity or use and seeking input from the public and regulatory agencies, tribes, and local governments and other interesting parties, and then ultimately issuing removal fill permits for the activities and for the use of state-owned waterways that are conditioned to protect those resources while allowing economic development, public safety improvements, and the exercise of private property rights. The team also investigates potential violations of the removal fill law and unauthorized activities on state-owned waterways and enforces compliance with laws and regulations. I'd like to touch on some program trends that we've seen. The most important one is that we've really seen a continued steady and high demand for services. My staff is really busy. We've seen historically high numbers for permits and other reviews since 2019, and things have sort of plateaued, but at a very high level. Removal fill authorizations continue at a very high volume. And this map here shows the locations of authorizations, removal fill authorizations that were issued statewide in 2022. As you can see, they're issued all over the state. In that year, the last year, the department issued 566 removal fill permits, which is a slight reduction from 615 in 21, but still a high volume historically, compared to past numbers. The department also issued historically high numbers of wetland determinations and wetland delineation report reviews, 321 and 344 respectively. All these numbers, of course, are in the report. The staff, my staff reviewed 1,228 wetland land use notices from counties, and that's the greatest number ever. So that's a peak for us. That represents a 53% increase from 2 years ago. So those numbers, and that's really reflective, these numbers are reflective of the amount of local development activity that's occurring, as well as I think the successful outreach efforts that my staff has made with local governments to make sure folks are aware of the removal fill law and proprietary authorizations that are required, and that we get that outreach. I want to note that the demand for service affects ability to provide service. We use data to identify potential needs for staffing or changes to how we deliver service so we can serve customers well and also ensure manageable workloads for our team. So next I'll touch base on issues related to management of state-owned waterways. This here is Jansen Beach. This is that very beach where you just voted to adopt the rules closing that area to overnight camping and fires. You can see the camps there on that campground area. Camp area was cleaned up this past spring, and then the two vessels there, that's the Saccharissa in the back, the black vessel, and then the Coast Guard Cutter Alert in the front. Those two vessels were just removed this past month and are actually being broken at Diversified Marine Industrial on the other side of Hayden Island as we speak. So we also removed the Tourist 2, which is a former ferry. Yes, Governor.
These are vessels that people have purchased for very small amounts, as I recall.
That is.
Can you give me just is it a ballpark? Is it literally dollars or something?
I actually don't know the actual numbers, but
okay.
The term that I heard used was a song.
Okay.
They were sold for a song and disposed of. These are vessels that are at the end of their functional life, and so they tend to be sold off often by the General Services Administration, and for very little money, basically putting the liability for the maintenance of those vessels onto a private party rather than the federal government. That is a source or a pipeline for some of these larger vessels. That is a real challenge. So the board and department were aware of the Saccharissa and alertness problems for about 3 years really, before we actually were able to address them. But we also had an unanticipated cleanup that needed to occur in the last couple months, and that was the Tourist 2, which is a former Columbia River ferry boat that also had been purchased. It was no longer a ferry boat once the bridge was built, and so had been purchased and used as a houseboat, and thoughts were to make it some sort of marine, maritime museum, but that didn't happen. That vessel actually sank, and the Coast Guard cleaned up the oils and fuels that were on the vessel, and then we actually contracted with a marine engineering firm to actually demolish that vessel in place. And so that all happened about 2 months ago. And so we actually have disposed of 3 major vessels in the last 2-3 months. Also, we have the issue of illegal camping on state-owned waterways, and that's below the ordinary high water in most places. And if you look at that photo there, you can see that the beach extends up, and the ordinary high water is about where those tents are. And so we had a high water event actually last June where that entire beach was underwater, and it was nice that we had just done the cleanup the May before that, and it was nice that happened before that high water came. Otherwise, all that material and debris would have been in the waterway itself. So we continue to partner with state agencies and local governments and law enforcement and social service organizations to address those issues. And in fiscal year 22, with the assistance of behavioral health and professionals and law enforcement, the department posted notice and cleaned 8 camps. And of course, you met Lieutenant Asbo today, and he was instrumental in his team in doing that work and working with folks to make sure they have a place to go when we do a cleanup, basically a houseless camp. At the Land Board's request, the department submitted a $40 million policy option package for the 23-25 biennium for the removal and prevention of ADVs, and hopes the legislature will see fit to create a statewide ADV program so that we can address this issue in the future. In addition to addressing abandoned derelict vessels and long-term camping on state lands, the department continues to engage with public partners and other stakeholders on various aspects of the Portland Harbor Superfund site cleanup on the Willamette River. And we'll be reporting on that in the future, I'm sure. It's a major effort we're involved in a voluntary mediation to allocate the cost of cleanup that. We worked very extensively with a Department of Justice and forensic consultants to basically work on that allocation process. So the department continues its emphasis on enhancing services and supporting communities. We provide information and assistance regarding waters of the state. We maintain and improve the state wetlands inventory and the local wetlands inventories, which identify the presence of known wetlands. And we also, I mentioned the peak that we had in wetland land use notice processes. Those and wetland determination services service free early warning mechanisms to local governments and property owners regarding the presence of wetland or other protected waterways. So we continue to do those, and we're seeing more and more of that kind of activity, which is really good because it gives property owners and local governments a heads up that there are wetlands or waters that need to have some permitting if you're going to affect those. So really nice to get that happening in advance. We also continue to examine and improve processes to meet customer needs. We're continuing to improve and add electronic services such as accepting and processing permit applications online. We're supporting development of mitigation banks as an efficient option for offsetting impacts to wetlands, providing better environmental outcomes at a lower per acre cost than individual mitigation projects. In this slide example here is the Marys River Mitigation Bank in Benton County. It's a large-scale wetland restoration project that generated 71 wetland credit acres that can be used to offset impacts of development. You can see that it looks very nice. It's a very natural wetland that was actually developed out of formerly farmed wetland areas and areas that had been drained for farming as well. The department approved 2 mitigation banks last year, the Amazon Prairie Bank located northwest of Eugene and the Yoncalla Creek located in Yoncalla. There are currently 26 mitigation banks with a total of 367 acre credits available and at least 3 more in development. I want to touch a little bit on program effectiveness. Several data points in the report help demonstrate the effectiveness of the program in protecting waters and wetlands, particularly for removal fill permitting. the department conducts compliance monitoring by spot checking permitted activities to provide a reliable indication of permit compliance. In 22, we monitored a sample of 135 projects, which is roughly 25% of the projects, and showed a compliance rate of 83%, which is pretty good. Obviously, we work to make that higher, but 83% is actually pretty good for permit compliance. Of the almost 893 active removal fill permits, only 6 enforcements were open for projects. So the ones they're not in compliance, generally the applicants are pretty good about getting back into compliance. It's relatively rare for us to actually do an enforcement action in order to get compliance on a permit. The department also investigates potential unpermitted activities, whether it's an issue noted by our team or reported by local government or a neighbor. That's actually usually how we hear about a removal fill violation. The department opened 51 enforcement files during the reporting period, and we closed 46. So we're staying pretty much even in terms of the number of open files. All those efforts have resulted in protecting the water resources under the department's purview. And the department has documented a net increase statewide of 1,607 acres of wetlands since 2005. You kind of see the pattern of that in figure 2 of the report. I would like to touch base on the legislative session. We did an internal study of removal fill permits, waterway leases, and other wetland and waterway program services, and determined that fee revenue does not consistently cover program operating expenses. I've reported on this previously to the board. Additionally, the cost of abandoned and derelict vessel cleanups, such as the $12.2 million global cleanup on the Columbia, and the need to address the growing issue of long-term camping on public waterways and state-owned lands, are unpredictable and extreme expenses. When operating and cleanup expenses exceed fee revenues, Common School Fund interest earnings cover the remaining program costs. And that, of course, is a challenge. DSL is addressing this ongoing subsidization through legislation proposed for the 23 session that requests statutory changes to allow the department to establish removal fill program fees in rural and reducing the personal property holding requirement pertaining to clean up on ADVs and at campsites. So it'll allow us to change the fee structure via rule to better basically capture the costs of implementing the program. These, as I mentioned previously, also at the land board's request, the department is requesting $40 million in general funds for the next biennium to support removal of ADVs in Oregon's waterways. And so those requested resources will also support our participation in collaborative efforts to address ADVs long-term. This needs to be a team effort with state, local government, and federal partners. It shouldn't all sit on the Department of State Lands and on the Common School Fund. Getting the wetland and waterway programs to a place of financial self-sufficiency safeguards Oregon's Common School Fund and ensures the critical services continue to be provided. And then to finish, I would like to
Bill, can I just jump in there for a second? I don't know if folks have had conversations about legislative champions for that effort. We obviously have the treasurer and the secretary here, but I don't know if you've had any conversations with legislators about their willingness to support and champion that effort.
Governor Brown, I have not, but Malia Masiba, our legislative analyst, certainly has. And yes, we're aware that we need champions to move that forward. And there actually that does appear to be kind of a groundswell of recognition of the issue and of support for addressing that issue. And I think the recent successes that we've had in removing these 3 vessels that I just mentioned, I think will really help with some momentum and demonstrating the ability to address them and what's involved in doing so.
And I assume that other partners like the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office and others can help sort of raise the attention and the resources needed to tackle these issues.
Yes, I'm sure they can and are willing to do so.
Yes, Governor, I would say before the meeting began, we had a conversation, Bill and I did, with Sheriff Reese, and he said that in 2 days, they're meeting with some of the marina owners to talk to them about things that they can do to prevent these vessels from getting out into the waterway.
Madam Chair, thank you. The only other thing I was going to mention is, of course, students and advocates for school funding will also be an important part of this conversation, since it's the school fund that covers that in the absence of the legislative decision.
Great.
Yeah, Governor Brown, Treasurer Rita, I suspect the educational beneficiaries will be very supportive of this.
We did have a meeting with the education beneficiaries, I think about a month or so ago. Time flies by. But they were very much interested in this legislation. As one stakeholder said, this is the kids paying for adult problems. And it should be adults paying for adult problems.
Correct.
So-
Well said.
Great soundbite.
It's really great. Okay, let's hope that will translate into action and funding.
Yes, and really, I'm done with my presentation. I just really wanted to recognize the program staff. They do an outstanding job of delivering the program and protecting waters of the state with a small, lean crew. They did an amazing response to the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic and adapted to full-time teleworking and social distancing quickly and with minimal lapse in customer service. And we've not seen a reduction in volume of permit applications and other applications and requests. So they've really done a great job. We've actually experienced quite a bit of churn in terms of personnel in the last couple of years. We've got multiple persons in new roles, and we're struggling to recruit for some, certain positions like other agencies, and basically everybody's having trouble hiring quality folks at this point. And so staff has to step in and do the work of another position as well to cover that when we have a lapse like that. So they've just done an amazing job, and I just really wanted to recognize them to the board. So with that concludes my presentation. The report has lots and lots more detail if you're interested. And at this point, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. Any questions? I am not seeing any questions. Again, I want to echo your words of gratitude to your amazing team. They're doing really good work under very difficult circumstances, and hopefully we can make sure that at least in terms of some pieces that it's going to be general fund or other dollars paying for the work, so our school children do not have to. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Governor.
I want to point out, Governor and members of the board, I'm not sure you noticed, but all of the photographs that accompanied this report were taken by members of our staff, which is, I'm just was fascinated by these. I also did want to bring to the board's attention, I've spoken to the governor about this, there's been an increasing number of potential violent encounters with some of our removal fill violators. The rhetoric has increased to the point where our staff has been threatened to be shot at. And we're not the only natural resource agency that is experiencing these kinds of things. So we did raise it with the governor, and I believe she's looking into the matter. And we are certainly going to raise this issue with the legislature as well. And all of my colleagues at the other natural resource agencies are just as concerned as I am. And I appreciate all of the staff working in circumstances that put them in harm's way. And we want to make sure that they stay out of harm's way.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think next up, Director Walker, is the strategic plan progress report.
It is, Governor, and I would like to invite Allie Ryan Hansen, our communications director, and Sean McMullen, our IT manager and CIO, because Sean is going to talk about one of our focus projects. So I'm going to disappear. Yeah, I'm going to just disappear while you guys. I'll put my name tag down. Come on up, Sean. Hi, right there.
Perfect. Good morning, and thank you,
Morning.
Director
Thank you.
Walker, Governor Brown, Treasurer Reed, Secretary Fagan. For the record, my name is Allie Ryan Hansen. I'm DSL's communications manager. My pronouns are she, her, and happy to be before you this morning with another strategic plan progress report. I get to tell you what Team DSL is working on that is going to help us make progress toward our 4 strategic goals of exceptional service, thriving Oregon, supporting schools, and great workplace. First, an update on some focus projects. Sean is here to talk with you about the modern permitting and information system, and I'll turn it over to him in just a second. The real estate management plan, current status is on that is we are in the public and stakeholder engagement phase, gathering information and having conversations about responsibilities for managing school lands, as well as getting some perspectives and ideas on how we can manage lands to benefit both schools in Oregon. So that's ongoing in October and November, and then we'll have an update for you on that in December. The Elliott State Research Forest, Director Walker is actually going to provide an update on that under others. So I'm off the hook during this strategic plan, but we are working hard on that first bullet, which is completing those required tasks in SB 1546. The South Slough Wasson Creek watershed restoration, the restoration plan was approved by the Management Commission just last month. So that is another check mark for that project. The other big thing that team is working on is securing funding. They have been invited to submit, I want to make sure I get this right, invited to submit a full grant proposal to NOAA to receive Infrastructure and Jobs Act funding for the project, and they're going to request about $3.5 million. So that is exciting. They're working hard on that. It's due at the end of the month, and we should know by the end of the year. Bill just did a fabulous job of updating you on what we're doing with the waterways and wetlands program cost piece. So I believe those are the only updates that I had, and I'm going to turn it right over to Sean for the modern permitting and information system update.
Thank you, Ally. Good morning, Governor Brown, Treasurer Fagan, and Secretary Fagan and Treasurer Reed.
Confused a lot.
You know, when you're nervous, you sometimes make mistakes, right? So my name is Sean McMullen, for the record. I am the IT manager and CIO for the Department of State Lands. My pronouns are he and him. Thank you for the time this morning to talk about our modern permitting and information system project. The current tool is called the Land Administration System. It is now 21 years old. It was very old for an IT system. It was designed for an in-office setting and not really developed for in-the-field work. It is built on a platform or on technology that is no longer supported. So it is becoming very difficult to maintain and keep secure. This new system is really important for the agency's work in land ownership, removal fill, waterway permitting, processing our records and school land management records, financial information, and extensive data about the agency's operations. It'll all be housed in this new system. It will probably touch every part of the organization. It's long past time to adopt a new system, and we want to move into a more compatible operating system. And we want a system that will be created to meet our unique needs as an agency and improve the workflows and processes we use in our day-to-day activities. One of the major components will be a customer portal that will allow better access to the public to interact with the department and be more transparent. We're creating a system that will grow with us over time, meet our needs as things change. And through that, this work that we're doing will help us achieve all 4 of our strategic goals. The customer portal will help us meet the goal of exceptional service and making services and information available to the public online. A more modern system will provide better access to the agency's data and identify and evaluate program improvements, and that will support our Thriving Oregon goal. The ability to adapt a new system to meet evolving needs will support the possible changes in fee structures, for example, and for agency programs which are connected to our supporting schools goal. Having a modern system that meets the day-to-day needs of the agency's employees, which is important, will support the agency's great workplace, ideally lifting some of the frustrations of working for the system rather than system working for you. Some of the accomplishments we've made to date, what we've achieved is we've achieved stage gates 1 through 3 through our oversight. We completed the preparation stages for the principal construction of the new system. We've done an extensive requirements gathering sessions to ensure the system meets our needs as we move forward. We've issued a request for proposal for the construction of the system. That's been done. We've selected the vendor and we've negotiated a contract with that selected vendor. We've kicked off our meetings with the new construction vendor just this last week. We want to make sure that we are prepared moving forward to adopt the new system. So we've contracted with an organization to help us with organizational change management to ensure that we're prepared for this large scale change and that the system is fully adopted when we're ready. So some of the major tasks we plan to do over the next few months, year and a half, are that we will begin to refine our schedule, bringing on the contractor for construction. We're going to train our core team, our core project team on how to use the tools to work with that vendor to ensure that everything works smoothly during the construction phase. We're going to create environments that we will put this system into. We're going to have a test, training, and production environment that we'll use going forward. And that's happening this month in October. Next month in November, we're going to start defining our master plan. We're going to refine the requirements that we've gathered to date with the vendor and make sure that they understand our needs. We're going to develop the to-do lists of things that we need to do to accomplish to have a complete system at the end of the construction phase. And we're going to sort those into a logical order that makes sense to deliver that with starting probably with the most complex pieces first so that we have better experience as we get to the easier pieces. So after November, we're going to start construction in December, and that'll happen for 13 months. We're going to start configuring each workflow that we use within the department in a series of what they call sprints. We're going to do it in an agile development process. So we're going to build 2-week time buckets. We're going to put those to-do lists in that 2-week time bucket. We're going to try and get them done and make working software by the end of that sprint. So we'll see the system work as we move. It won't be a big bang development process, but we'll test each workflow as we go through it in each of those sprints. So it should be completely working software at the end of each of those. The end of December of 2023, we'll move into the phase where we're going to get ready. We're going to do user acceptance testing. We want to make sure the system works as intended. We've done all the little tests. We want to do a big test to make sure everything works from beginning to end as we expect it to. We'll be doing preparation for data conversion from our old system into our new system. And we'll be training users so that they're ready to accept the use of the system and fully capable of doing their day-to-day jobs when we go live. So between January and March, we'll be preparing all those things, making sure all the bugs are taken care of that we found in those testings. We're going to load the data from our current system, our last system in the final stages, and then we'll start using Owls. So Owls is kind of our internal name for it. We're going to fix any bugs we found as people, start using the new system in a complete way. And hopefully in April, we'll be completely stable and working as expected. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Sean. That sounds terrific. And I'm sure that the employees of the agency are very excited to have this project fully implemented. So questions or comments? None. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Finished unscathed. So breathe now.
For one mistake.
Thanks, Sean. Every time he talks about that project, I hear the 90s dial-up sound in my head, and it makes me think about just how 90s me could not have imagined like the ease with which we get on the internet today.
Oh my gosh.
I think this project, like we are using a 90s system right now to do this work. I think this is just going to change our entire world. So thank you, Sean, for coming and doing this. Are you coming back? Do you have more? Yeah, just one more. Finally, just a few quick highlights on the outcomes advanced slide, which I still can't quite look directly at. because there's just so much on it, but this is every project that we are actively working on in 2022-23. And I wanted to note just a handful of outcome achievements today. First, our support services team are cross-training so that multiple people are skilled in specific work, which is really making those team members way more nimble in providing service to Oregonians and building their confidence as a DSL team, providing them an opportunity to expand and polish their skill sets. The next thing I wanted to mention is our HR team is making huge strides on a formal internship program. They've got a program framework together with initial emphasis on connecting with natural resource organizations who are likely to have folks who would benefit from experience and hands-on learning with DSL. The last thing, Director Walker kind of unknowingly led me into this. We have a DSL photo library now, which is incredible. Like you may have been noticing the really cool images that we've been showing in slideshows lately. That is because they're pretty, one, and two, we now have a library that tells us what they show, who took them, when they're from, and all of that other information. Almost 500 pictures at this point, mostly contributed by staff. It shows Oregon and Oregonians what we do in a really vivid way, and it's just such a delight to have those stories at our fingertips and be able to dig a little deeper behind the image. So this concludes the strategic plan update. I and others will be back before you in February. That's our big annual update. We'll talk metrics, we'll talk progress during that annual report. Governor, I'm just looking at you and thinking, oh, you won't be there for that. We'll be thinking of you. But yes, that will be fun for February. Are there any questions that I can answer for you before I turn it back over to Director Walker?
Great, Allie. Thank you very much. I am not seeing any questions. Really appreciate the presentation. And I know my fellow land board members will look forward to the update in February. So thank you. All right, I think we've got two things. Number one, our in lieu lands update and other. So,
Yep, I have about 3 things under other, but before we get to that, we'll hear from Bill about the in lieu land selection update.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Bill Ryan. I'm Deputy Director of Operations here at the Department of State Lands. And looking at the clock, I think I'm going to give the Cliff Notes version of this in lieu lands update. The bottom line is that the common school trust lands that we manage to generate revenue for schools, came from the U.S. Congress back in 1859 at statehood. Unfortunately, not all of those lands that were, identified on a large map to be trust lands were actually available for use as trust lands. Some of them were already in private ownership or were part of a tribal reservation or something like that. The federal government owed us 4,400 acres roughly. The state took the BLM to court back in the 90s and won and got, got the authority to get those 4,400 acres. We have an agreement from 1995, an intergovernmental agreement with BLM about getting those properties. Since then, we've received 2,900 and 2,600 acres. But there's still roughly 1,477 acres that are owed to the department. We are engaged with the BLM. They've had a lot of turnover in staff, and so it's been challenging to get engagement with them. But in October of 20, we basically provided a request for the transfer of properties that were identified on their disposal list. And they are basically processing those now. We have identified 3 forested parcels in Lynn County that total 244 acres that are relatively unencumbered and should be able to be transferred to the state relatively easily. So we're focusing on those, trying to get those transfers accomplished in the next year. But we also have selections in the Prineville district of properties, and those are listed in the memo. But those are the remaining acres that are owed to us. Many of those require cultural resource surveys or other types of natural resource surveys and processing that needs to happen. There's also a NEPA process that has to happen. These are all federal processes, and so those are going to take longer to get into state ownership. We're actually looking at maybe even helping to provide some of those surveys in order to facilitate this process. So for the immediate next steps is we're focusing on moving forward to acquire the Salem district parcels. That's the 224 acres of forest land parcels, and completing that transfer in 2024. And we're going to continue to push for those Prineville parcels, which include also some range lands, but some potentially developable lands, kind of like the Stevens Road property and the South Redmond property that could actually be of great value to the department.
I can't speak for my fellow board members, but I suspect we can all sleep better at night knowing that the federal government has given us our due share of acres. So we look forward to having that happen over the next year or so. Secretary Fagan.
Thank you, Governor. I just wanted to note for other land board members, if you didn't see it, there's a great editorial in the Bend Bulletin last week on this issue. And obviously it was very apropos that we were dealing with this at land board today, but it was a great description of the issue, but also obviously commending your work with the Department of State Lands, working with the Bureau of Land Management to identify those lands.
Thank you.
Let's get this done.
Yeah. I was in the legislature in the Senate when I got a presentation in the Senate Education Committee from the Department of State Lands. Ann Hannes was director at the time. And I was shocked then that we didn't have all our land, and I'm still shocked now. But as Bill pointed out, there's been a lot of turnover in the feds. And not only that, they don't have enough staff. So we'll probably have to end up doing some of that work. But anyway, thank you, Mr. Ryan. So I'm going to move into the other so I can get you all out of here. I just have 3 quick things. One is to let you know that we did submit our agency requested budget on time, September 1st. That included the $50 million ask in general fund. I did get a notice this morning that we will be receiving the analyst recommended budget by tomorrow. And we'll have 2 days to lodge an appeal of anything we don't like in there. But that's all for the new governor to decide. So we'll see where that goes. But I really want to commend staff for getting that in on time. Those are complex documents.
Director Walker, just to confirm, my administration will be sitting in on the appeals. So we'll oversee that process.
Excellent. Excellent. All right, thank you. So then I want to give you an update. Bill mentioned the Tourist 2 and the other boats. So I wanted to give you the cost estimate. The Tourist 2 cost us about 1.43 million. The owner is now deceased of that vessel. He passed away in a pedestrian vehicle accident. And so we are pursuing his estate. The Alert and Saccharissa are looking to cost about 4.7 million total, but the Coast Guard put in 2.2, Metro put in 2 million, and the department 500,000. And our part may raise a little, but that's pretty good. The Tiffany, which is our last big ship that we were looking at getting rid of this year, the estimate for that one is 1.4 million, and that one will be all our responsibility unless we have partners that we can pull in. I'm not sure the Coast Guard's going to be involved in that one, but we are working on that. I will tell you, I know the treasurer asked me if we knew who the owner of the Tiffany was. We do, but we can't locate him. He's not dead. But we believe he's houseless, and we do not think we're going to recoup anything, but trust me, we are on the case. The owners of the Alert and Saccharissa are 2 now dissolved nonprofit organizations. One is based in Oregon, formed by a deceased gentleman. The other was based in Texas, and we received a letter from the registered agent attorney letting us know the organization was dissolved, which is so nice. They can just dissolve the organization and leave the mess to us. But that's where we're at with those boats. And I did mention to you that the sheriff's office is going to speak to marina owners. And then I also want to let you know that I had Malia Masiba on our staff reach out to our the gentleman that we're working with on the Elliott State Forest, and we reached out to GSA to see how these boats are getting into our waters. The interesting answer that we got from the General Services Administration is that GSA isn't the only one who sells these boats. NOAA, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, DOD, U.S. Coast Guard, and any other federal program that has marine vessels in their operational structure has an individual disposal program and procedure. So we are going to have to contact each of the agencies to find out what their protocols are. We have added that to our list for the ADV project manager once we get the program in place, because we don't have the capacity right now to do that.
Director Walker, I don't know if you've had conversations with anyone in our federal delegation, but I do just happen to have a phone call scheduled with Senator Markley tomorrow. I'm more than happy to raise this issue with him. Clearly, it needs to apply to several of the federal agencies. If you could get me a few talking points, that would be very helpful. And hopefully we could get Senator Markley paying attention to this.
I appreciate that, Governor. We'll have some talking points to you by the end of the day.
And I'm more than happy to reach out to Senator Wyden on this as well.
Right, thank you. And finally, I wanted to illustrate why it is so important for us to build on our partnerships in these efforts, because it's complicated, both from a financial perspective and also just from a cleanup perspective. I wanted to read a notice of appreciation that we received from Sergeant Stephen Dangler of the Multnomah County Sheriff River Patrol. When we raised those two vessels, the Alert and Saccharissa. So I just think it's very telling and very appreciative. And he says, it has taken over 3 years to clear the property and waterway at 1401 North Hayden Island Drive, just west of the interstate bridge on Hayden Island. This has been an incredible endeavor in which I never expected would drag on as long as it did, nor take the energy, time, and resources to accomplish our goal. I cannot begin to thank everyone enough for all the efforts put forth over the last few years to restore the property and waterfront to its beauty. Law enforcement, U.S. Coast Guard, fire personnel, and EMS have responded to many calls over the years, from trespassing, thefts, fires, disturbances with weapons, and a drowning. DEQ and DSL have been supportive with ongoing inspections, cleanups, and closures. Oregon State Marine Board and Metro have assisted with cleanups and vessel removals. Property management and security have helped keep the area clear and fund some cleanup efforts. And I also want to give a big thanks to my team at River Patrol for their tireless efforts, assisting with all the calls and projects in attempts to clear the area over the years. In the end, all thanks go to the U.S. Coast Guard, Metro, and DSL for working together to get the closure, the funds, and the contractors secured for the ship removals this month. There have been so many organizations involved, meetings, planning, efforts, and support of local businesses that I may have missed some, and I apologize in advance. On behalf of the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office, I want to make sure everyone gets a thank you and job well done for helping to restore this section of the island. Thank you, Sergeant Steve Dangler. So I just, it's appropriate that we talked about it today. And this is how complicated these have become. All right, the other item under other today, I want to give you an update on the Stevens Road property. House Bill 3318 passed into 2021, provided the opportunity to add 261 acres of the Stevens Road property to Ben's urban growth boundary. The bill requires the development be a complete community that includes affordable and workforce housing as part of a walkable neighborhoods. DSL worked with the city of Bend to develop a concept plan that demonstrates how future development of the remainder of the Stevens Road tract can help meet Bend's critical need for more affordable and middle income housing. And as you know, this will also be the first development to have set aside acreage for school district employee housing. At the end of August, the Department of Land Conservation and Development approved the concept plan, congratulating the city in their approval letter for an impressive level of public engagement, thoughtful approaches, and transparent and accessible documentation. The department is continuing to look forward to to their work with the city on the next step in the process to develop area-specific policies that will become part of the city's comprehensive plan and will guide the development of a future master plan for the track. The planning will continue into 2023, and once the UGB is expanded, lead to the sale of the remainder of the track to a private developer to complete the planning and development process. So we're very excited about that, as I'm sure you are as well. The other quick history lesson for you is if you remember back on February 5, 2019, you all granted a permanent easement to ODOT to build a new bridge over the Umpqua River in Scottsburg. Well, that bridge is complete and it was dedicated on September 29th, replacing that horrible old 1929 bridge with narrow lanes and tight corners, because back in 1929, the cars were small and the traffic was few. So the bridge is now in place. Finally, I wanted to give you a quick update on the Elliott, which you will get a more robust update in December because it's all things Elliott. Today's biggest Elliott update is that yesterday, DSL submitted the draft Habitat Conservation Plan and formal application to U.S. Fish and Wildlife and National Marine Fisheries Service for an incidental take permit under the Endangered Species Act. Staff for both federal agencies have advised us that they believe we have met the threshold for our application to be found legally sufficient under the ESA. The next step will, in the federal process, will be public review and comment. The draft environmental impact statement, known as an EIS, will also be posted for public comment along with the HCP. That process will begin sometime in November. After internal review by the DC offices of both federal agencies, and while there's still a lot of work to be done, this is a huge milestone after several years of work. And I want to tell you that we also had to contract for assistance at, was it with NIMS or US Fish and Wildlife? Because both of them, because they didn't have the staff. So in order for us to complete this project on time with all due dispatch, we paid for contracted service. I'm happy to report that HCP process is on schedule, not necessarily under budget, I'm afraid, but it is on schedule, mostly due to the fact that we had to pay for extra help. Both federal agencies have put their shoulder into making this process collaborative and moving it forward these past few months. And right now, we are on track to meet the deadline of having NOAA and US Fish and Wildlife able to publish a joint notice of availability of a final HCP by July 1, 2023. So take that as an accomplishment home with you, Governor, as you leave state service as our governor. And all of you here at the Land Board. The next independent review of the OSU financial plan required by Senate Bill 1546 is also progressing on schedule. You think I had a whip in place, but I don't. These staff here just know that we have all this work ahead of us, and we've appreciated the work from the treasurer's office as well, and Jeff Huntington on our staff, as well as everyone who works on, I can't tell you how many of us work on this project. But DSL has contracted with an independent forester with decades of experience overseeing forest operations in Oregon to support the review process and advise both the college and DSL on the strengths and weaknesses of the current financial plan and the model the plan is based on. I will update you as DSL finalizes its review of the operational financial plan for the research forest, which should be forthcoming. While we are doing our work, OSU continues to develop key elements of the forest management plan with the advisory committee support in time for our December meeting. A lot of substantive work is still needed, and there is no doubt some big discussions are yet to be had with stakeholders on the advisory committee, but OSU is working hard to meet their commitments. And I keep reminding them that December is our deadline. Lastly, the department is committed to a transparent flow of information for the public as we continue this important work. DSL has been and will continue to keep the public up to date, posting news, documents, and meeting materials, in addition to holding public information sessions for everyone interested in the Elliott process. We will see you in December at our last board meeting of the year with all things Elliott. And Mr. Treasurer, I know this was a dream of yours a long time ago, and I'm hoping we're bringing it home because we've all put in a tremendous amount of effort. And I think it's all looking very good, and I'm very excited about it. To finally do something with the Elliott after years and years and years of debate and lawsuits, to really bring it home and make Oregonians proud that we can actually pull ourselves together and get this accomplished. So that concludes my report, Governor.
Thank you very much, Director Walker. Any questions or comments? All right, really appreciate the report. Looking forward to our December meeting. And I have to say, I'm quite pleased about the HCP. That has been, at least for me, a close to a 14-year battle. So I'm pleased we got to a situation where their federal partners feel like they can move forward in a way that will benefit both, I think, the environment and the species on it. So
I have a couple of HCPs in my office that have been there from my predecessors that ended up on the cutting room floor. So we're very excited that ours has been elevated beyond the cutting room floor.
that's great. Thank you. And with that, we are adjourned. Woohoo!